Welcome to Twin Whistles Detroit YouTube, Detroit Lions News podcast. I just kind of wanted to put this video out here or this audio out here because I feel like this is something that needs to be said. It needs to be said. Everyone was kind of waiting for the big signing, eloquently, like maybe a Jalen Ramsey, maybe a Bobby Wagner, maybe someone along the lines of like a big time free agent. And they were kind of pissed at the Alex Anzalone signing. And you know what? Alex Anzalone is he's not the best player, but he's a right player. And I know a lot of people sit here and they say, well, he misses tackles, he's bad in coverage, he does this, he does that. I think I get what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell are doing. And let me explain. Way back when I interviewed with the Detroit Red Wings. And the one thing you know about the Detroit Red Wings is how much history they have, how much pride they have in their program, and how well they do. And the process they have to become winners again. And this was when Ken Holland was still there as a general manager. But I was talking to someone who was in the organization, and I literally said, like, how does this happen? Like, how do you get a team to come back from the Dead Wings, what they were before they were the Red Wings? They were significantly just one of the worst teams in the league. They had to give away cars to get people into the games. It was a bad sense. So I asked this guy, like, what does it take? And he goes, it takes time, but it also takes a lot of effort. It takes more effort to get to that mountaintop than it is to stay there. Like, I think that was one of the major quotes that I don't forget. That was 4 or 5 years ago, and you look at it now and you go, okay. You look at the Lions and you look at what they're doing. Okay, none of the stuff that they're doing is out of the ordinary. Um, One of the things that you notice with the Alex Anzalone signing was how good he was in the locker room and how well he was mentoring a player like Malcolm Rodriguez. It's not easy for an older player to come in and mentor a younger player that might take his job. Let's just be honest with it. There is a lot of players in the NFL. There is a lot of players all along the lines that they won't do that. Like, I can tell you for a fact, there is a lot of football players, there is a lot of hockey players, baseball players, basketball players. They won't mentor a young player just because this guy could take my job. It takes a strong person to be a mentor for a younger player. Like, this is how we do it, this is what we do, and this is how we do it. When the Red Wings they re-signed Dylan Larkin a couple weeks ago. A lot of people ask, why'd they pay him the money? Okay. Well, the reason they paid him money is because he learned under Pavel and he learned Datsuk and Zetterberg, and he learned the way that the Red Wings operate. Going forward as a Lions fan, what you're gonna see is these younger players start to take big steps in leadership roles. And this is where the puppy really starts to get going. Guys like Aiden Hutchinson, Malcolm Rodriguez, guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown. These are guys that could be your leaders in the future. And what you want to do is give them the best chance to succeed by getting them guys they can learn from. One of the things that can't be understated about Jared Goff, he's not a Patrick Mahomes, he's not a Justin Herbert or a Josh Allen or any of those along the lines, but he's a good quarterback. And what he does best is be a leader. It's easy to be a leader when you're winning all the time, opposed to coming to a team that you were traded to that was starting at the effing bottom. They were starting at the bottom of the barrel. Let's go take it back a year or two where you were starting Jared Goff, right? Your offensive line was depleted. Taylor Decker was out. Frank Ragnow was out. All that was out. You had Brady Breeze as your safety. Like, it was a total mess. And in a year they changed the dynamic. They went 9-7. They barely missed the playoffs. And you can take a lot from that. And that is a credit to Jared Goff, the leader of the offense, and it's the leader. It's a testament to the leadership of the defense, which was Alex Anzalone, Michael Brockers. Michael Brockers didn't play that much, but the reality is he was a presence in the locker room. One of the things that gets under not one of the things that gets really underestimated is how a locker room operates. And what the Detroit Lions are doing right now is, yeah, it's not pretty. Okay, it's not pretty. They're not going out and signing Tremaine Edmonds. They're not going out and signing T.J. Edwards. They're not going out and signing these guys like they were supposed to. People wanted them to sign. They signed a guy in Cameron Sutton who's a smart player. Okay, they're gonna sign more guys along the line, but just let me just reiterate it to you. This is the way Brad Holmes is building the team. Okay, he wants smart football players, not just a smart football player, but one that has football intelligence. If you ever listen to Dan Campbell, he talks about FBI, which is football intelligence. And I can tell you right now, when I interviewed with the Red Wings a couple years ago, 5 years ago, one of the things they always talked about was IQ, hockey IQ. Like how is this guy in the span of a game where he might not be the best player, but he might be the right player. And you know who that player was? Dan Cleary. He won a Stanley Cup with the Detroit Red Wings. He was a pretty integral part in the 2008-2009 Red Wing team. And people always they didn't like him, kind of like Alex Anzalone, and they kind of glossed over the fact that Dan Cleary was a guy that could just get it done. Not pretty, he's not skilled at all. He wasn't a skilled guy like that Suk or Zetterberg. He was the guy that was he just did his job. And that's what hockey intelligence was to the Red Wings. And I can tell you right now, echoing that from the hockey intelligence to football intelligence, I think they like Alex Anzalone. I think what they did is they rewarded him for his taking those bridge deals. And I think that's why they gave to him. And I think what's going to happen now is they're going to go draft a linebacker and they're going to ask Alex Anzalone to mentor the kid again, mentor a new kid. And it's not going to be easy for Alex Anzalone. I mean, let's be honest. If you're totally honest, would you mentor the guy that's going to take your job? Probably not. Probably not. But Alex Anzalone has showed that he's more about the team than himself. And for that, I think that's a good reason to resign him by itself. Because listen, it's hard to build a culture in any sport. Okay? The teams that consistently win throughout years and decades, like if we go back to the Red Wings, they had a culture of just doing it the right way, right? San Antonio Spurs, they had a culture of doing it the right way, playing to their level. They weren't the most athletic guys, but they were the smartest guys. Okay, and you look at the Yankees, you look at the Patriots, teams that have won over and over again throughout a decade. They all start with one thing, and that's a culture. A culture of what they believe in and what they strive to be. And with this Detroit Lions team, what Brad Holmes is doing, he's building a culture that not only is sustainable for the short term, next year, the year after, he's building a culture that's sustainable for the long term. There's a guy in this state, his name is Tom Izzo, and if you're a Michigan fan, you might want to block your ears. But the reality of the situation is this guy has, year after year, he's built a team that's got to the NCAA tourney 25 straight years. That is a culture. You lose players, you gain players, and it's still, you get to the dance. You get to where you want to be. When the Red Wings were going 25 straight years to the playoffs, it was the same thing. There was players going, and there was players coming in. And it started with one nucleus, and that's what you're hoping with Brad Holmes and the Lions, especially with Hutch and Jared and St. Brown and Rodrigo and guys like that. Like, you're hoping that is the culture moving forward, because it takes 1 year. It takes 1 year to change a perception of what this team can be, adding an elite guy. I don't think the Detroit Red Wings would have added all those Hall of Famers in 2002 if they would have been just an average team. I think those Hall of Famers saw what was happening with that team and they wanted to be part of it. And that's what's happening with the Lions. Obviously, it's not showing right now, but when you get to the playoffs, when you win a playoff game, that's when you'll start to see this snowballing avalanche of momentum. You know, getting close to the playoffs doesn't count. I know people think it counts, but the reality of the situation is like if I'm a Levante David, if I'm a Bobby Wagner, if I'm a Jalen Ramsey, I don't know if the Detroit Lions have truly changed because they didn't get to the playoffs, they didn't win a playoff game, and they didn't do nothing by their standards. So with the Detroit Red Wings, with the Detroit Lions, it starts with one good year, and that will push you to sustainability for the long term. I'm Joe Chapp with Between the Whistles Detroit. You can keep it on this YouTube channel for more Detroit Lions content, Detroit sports content. Obviously, I just let the cat out of the bag with what I was talking about, but it had to be said.